Welcome back to Your 1230. I'm your host, Mike Salitro, and this is the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. Today, we are very excited to speak with Zane Landin. Zane is from Chino, California, a graduate of Cal Poly Pomona with a Bachelor of Science in Communication and Public Relations. He's worked at places like USAID, NASA, and General Motors. With mental health and he's a mental health and disability advocate, queer rights activist, entrepreneur, and positive change maker. Identifies as Hispanic, queer, and disabled. He's also the founder of Positive Vibes Magazine, a digital magazine dedicated to telling authentic stories about mental health, wellness, and inspiration. Lastly, he's the founder and president of Landing Dreams PR, a consulting business working with media and mental health advocates. Zane, welcome. We are really excited to speak with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You got it. And I've read probably 10% of the bio because there's a lot of things that you're up to and a lot of different projects you've got your hands in. But one thing I noticed that kind of ties them all together, or a lot of them together, is the art of storytelling and using stories or experiences to move a cause forward or to help shine a spotlight. So I was wondering, let's start there. How do you tell a good story?
I believe the art of good storytelling is showing that raw truth and without the fear of judgment happening. I think that sometimes when we tell our stories, we kind of hold back from the fear that we're going to be looked at or judged, and we might. But I think when people see that true, authentic story that you tell and you tell it with confidence, um, I think that's where a good story shines. And you'll see that in stories throughout media where people experience horrible stuff. If it's drug overdose or if it's suicide, but the way they tell the story, if it's informative and positive. And when I mean positive, obviously these are horrible things. But if you could tell it in a way where it's inspiring, where people don't feel like they're navigating the world by themselves, I think that's where you can spark some prolific change.
And no, that's a really good answer because I think it illustrates how it can be difficult to put these things out there, but you can still be confident knowing that I've got the best foot forward that I'm kind of stepping with, and I'm going to paint a picture that it's authentic to me, and I hope it's received positively. But most importantly, I hope it has a positive impact for those that choose to kind of look at it in a similar vein. So,
Mhm.
kind of taking a step back there, as you do a lot of things, when you bump into somebody new and they ask you what you do or what you're up to, how do you usually answer that?
I usually answer it by stating I am an authentic storyteller, which is the title that I kind of have adopted, which I do identify that way because I think everyone should identify that way though. I think everyone has this ability to be a storyteller. We just tell ourselves that we can't. And when we look at people who are storytellers, we think of the people that are at the parties, are always the joy to be around. They always have all these stories to share. That's right. They're a good storyteller, but that doesn't mean you can't be. And that doesn't mean you have to tell 100 stories a, to have this vibrant voice. I think people kind of, again, hold themselves back and let themselves down a bit because they don't kind of tap into that. And I think being a storyteller is being imaginative. And I wrote an article about how everyone has a strong imagination, but we don't give ourselves enough credit and we don't tap into it. We don't like literally you can ask anyone to think about any scenario. Think about yourself as a superhero. People can think of it and they can think of themselves in any situation. That's how powerful our minds are in our brains, but we don't see ourselves that way. We kind of hold ourselves back because we don't see ourselves as imaginative, but we are. And I think another thing to go back to the question just a bit, I also think that you need to tell stories where people are actual real human beings. Because I think that sometimes in media you have characters that are just completely flawless. And I don't think we resonate with those characters, depending on who. But I think when you have a character that actually has a flaw and that actually propels the story forward rather than holding it back, I think is exciting. So I think that's another way that you can tell a story where it's relatable and people can actually see a piece themselves in that character or that story. So that's what I would say what I do daily, and that includes you didn't have my bio because when I sent it to you, I wasn't working in this job yet, but I'm working at National Geographic Society and I am doing internal communications. So I major in communication, so I do believe in storytelling, and it's what I do with all the things I do with the magazine, with the Landing Dreams PR, with PR business. So it's all tied together with storytelling.
Very nice. And I think it's a much deeper conversation, one that we're probably not going to have time to go into, but you hit on something very insightful, and you're very insightful in your point that there was this portrayal of the flawless character for a very long time. And that's how many stories were told, many characters were portrayed. And that once there were leading characters with some flaws or some dark sides that we started rooting for, it kind of was interesting to the audience because we hadn't seen the anti-hero or the person who was no longer perfect leading the way, and they became popular and still are popular. So again, much deeper conversation. I don't want to veer down that lane, but you mentioned the new role. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no, I just started. I know you said I'm from Chino, and I was from Chino, but I just moved literally last week. So I
Congratulations.
arrived in, yeah, thank you. I arrived in Washington, D.C., working at National Geographic Society. It's a hybrid role. I go in 2 days a week. I haven't even gone in yet to their base camp, which is like their headquarters. And yeah, right now I've just been supporting internal communications. So my position itself is internal communication specialist. So I'm doing all the internal communications. So you're not necessarily going to be stories written by me outside of National Geographic Society. The stuff I'm doing is inside the company, and it impacts the employees and the stuff that I'm working on. It's very exciting. And I've only been there a short time, but everyone is incredibly friendly. Everyone, I mean, they have a chief storytelling officer there. So they believe in the power of storytelling. They have a storytelling summit where explorers from across the world come together and share what they're working on and how to elevate the world and everything. So I was looking for, when I graduated, I was looking for an internal communications role because I just loved the importance of it, and how important it is to connect people, especially during the pandemic. Internal communications I thought was really important for businesses to thrive, especially when everyone felt kind of scattered. You had to figure out a way to keep everyone level-headed and together. So I just love the work of internal comms. So it's my first entry level role. So like I said, just graduated in May. So really excited to be here doing this work.
Very nice, very nice, and congratulations on the recent graduation. I didn't realize it was within the year, so we'll throw that out there. I wasn't expecting to veer off, but it is a lot for somebody to move cross country in a relative short amount of time. How did that process go? How did you prepare, and what did you not expect that you've encountered now that you're on the East Coast?
I think the one thing that helped me the most is I had someone that knew what they were doing. So I think that's the most important thing you can do is surround yourself with people that have moved before, or even just ask someone. Like you may have a mentor or a friend. You're like, have you ever moved before? And they might say, I have. And these are things that you need to look out for. And I had a lot of mentors that kind of told me things I needed to think about with taxes and my address and all these different things. And my partner moved with me, so that was very helpful. And I understand that not everyone is lucky enough to have their partner move with them, especially when they have a life in California. But that's how great our relationship is. And yeah, I think that helped me the most. And oof, right when I got to DC, I got super sick. So I was already kind of throwing curveballs for my health and everything, but not sick in a like terrible way, just bad allergies. But yeah, it's a new environment, new place, new job. So it's a whole different adventure I'm going through. And so I always tell people to kind of embrace the uncertainty. And it's a hard thing to do. But I think it's something that's important, especially what COVID kind of taught us, that we kind of have to embrace uncertainty, because COVID definitely made us fear uncertainty, but I think we also need to embrace a certain level of it. Not all, but we have to have a good balance of it. So, and sometimes I forget that. Like when I was right before I was going to move to DC, I was so afraid. I told myself I don't want to do it. I don't want to move. I still have second thoughts now still. So you still have those second thoughts, but you should always try to embrace that like feeling of uncomfortability, if that makes sense.
Yeah, especially being comfortable with the uncomfortable or the uncertain, because you can prepare as much as you want, you can safeguard, but you're always going to have some level of unknown or some level of new or some level of I have no idea how this is going to go. So the more quote unquote comfortable you can get with it, the easier it will be to navigate and the better you'll get at it. What I want to highlight something you said there was surrounding yourself with someone, in your case was who moved before, but a lot of the times there are people who have gone through what we're going through or have some level of experience with what we don't, and leaning on them as mentors, as friends, as guides is a great way to kind of borrow their knowledge and as a way to learn from their experiences as well. So I think that's a great point to kind of start off that. So thank you for adding or starting there. Going back to the storytelling, I'm public relations student myself, and there were two
Oh,
things
great.
that kind of jumped out at me. And as you were going through your beliefs on storytelling, the first was show don't tell. That's one of the things that I always think about when writing, communicating in any ways. That if I can add a story or I can put a visual into someone's mind versus just kind of blandly talking about it or telling them, that's a great way to do it. Is there a way that you've been able to do that, or is there kind of a similar mantra that you believe in?
I believe in I believe in showing who you are. And I think that's like you said, show the storytelling, don't tell the storytelling. And that's how we operate in real life, don't we? I think when you think about someone, are they nice because they told you they're nice, or are they nice because they're nice? It's because they're nice. And so if you're gonna paint a story, paint it kind of like reality. And we're not moved by people that just tell us they're a certain way. We can observe it, we can see it. And so I'm always pushing for people, if they want to always kind of bring forward that authenticity in themselves and find people that will challenge them, but also support them so they can continue being that person. And so people can see that light shine through when they can, start being who they are and not being afraid of what people think.
Yeah, and even swapping out adjectives there. Someone can tell you they're authentic all day, but if you spend enough time with them and you can see it's like, well, I can tell that what you're saying doesn't match up with your actions, and generally those speak louder. So that's a good point. The second thing I thought of when you mentioned internal communications was
Mhm.
kind of the 4 degrees or 4 levels of what happens when you're communicating, especially when it's the same folks, maybe different departments, but messages can get lost. And the way it was described to me, I just was kind of blew my mind. Was there's when you're crafting a message, there's what you want to say, then there's what you actually say, then there's what the audience heard, and then there's what the audience understood. So now you are 4 levels away from where you started. It's like I had this wonderful idea in my head. I didn't communicate it as I wanted to, and now they've walked away with something completely different. So as you are just starting this role, how are you safeguarding against miscommunication, or I'm the new guy and they have practices in place and this is a big job, is really important. And that's a rambling question. So obviously I'm not doing a good job of communicating my thoughts here, but internal communication, a lot goes into it. So what have you experienced so far? What is your kind of 90-day plan as you start this role?
I mean, I can definitely speak on internal communications in the role itself. I think anyone can take from this because I think the most important thing you can do is when you go into a business and a business does have an organizational culture, that you sit and you observe and you listen. I think that's the most important thing you can do is because that can easily happen if you go into a culture and you start communicating what you believe outside and coming from the inside, and it's a completely different culture. Yeah, they're going to misinterpret or not understand what you're saying, or the message will get lost. So I think the most important thing to do as a communicator, and again, every single person's a storyteller and a communicator. It doesn't really matter what your job is. If you send one email, you're a communicator. But there are people who are professional communicators, right? And so that's what I would say is, listen, understand the language of the organization, do your job and read what the company's saying, be updated with what everyone's talking about so you understand what people are saying, what topics there are. Talk to people across the company, talk to people from different sections of the business so you understand what's on their mind, what they're thinking about. And so I think when you can come to that, you have like a consensus in your mind of this is what the organization is kind of standing on, this is what the language is used. So when I craft my message, I consider that, and I of course consider what I do in storytelling, and you be as clear as possible as well. A lot of people, I find it always interesting that people always think more is better. And so, like writing a 5,000 page essay or 5,000 word essay, I think it's more impressive we can write a 100 word essay and convey the same message. Because I think shorter and lesser is actually better when it comes to communication. Because you don't want the message to get mixed. You don't want there to be too much jargon, and people are going to misinterpret it. I hope that makes sense.
It certainly does. And I'm taking notes over here because you're saying so many things I want to follow up on. The first is a quote that I'm definitely going to butcher. I think it's Mark Twain, but I attribute anything brilliant to him. So it's possible that it's not. I think he said, I would have written you a shorter note, but I ran out of time. So I think it's that one of those things that, yeah, you're first, especially when you use fresh, red draft, look at it with fresh eyes and like, wow, I can get rid of 30% of this. So you can edit. Generally you can get it across in fewer words. But the other thing I wanted to highlight for sure, where you started that answer with culture and being a good listener, is that anytime, and infiltrates the wrong word, but anytime that you are going to join a group that already exists or a company, friends, whatever it is, they have a informal, formal culture, and a good way to observe that is to listen to their communication style, how they talk to each other, what they talk about, and then to adopt that. Because if you go in there and ignore it or pretend it doesn't exist, it makes it that much more difficult to communicate effectively. So I think that's a really good place to start. Um, I also read in your bio that you had the opportunity to meet President Biden this year. What was that like?
I met him through the first ever Mental Health Youth Action Forum that was planned by MTV. They collaborated or partnered with several mental health nonprofits like National Alliance on Mental Illness, um, Born This Way Foundation, Active Minds, so some of the biggest organizations in mental health. And also, they of course hosted at the White House. So there was so many different partners involved in this forum, which was super exciting. And what I loved about it was, it was tackling youth mental health. I feel like we have heard the government talk about mental health, but coming from an angle from the youth angle and also hearing the perspective of actual youth rather than politicians and people who are older, these are people who actually can speak on youth mental health because it has directly impacted them and the people around them. And I applied, and really fortunately I was selected. I really didn't think I was gonna be selected. I even kind of came to my mind, I was like, I'm not gonna get this. I'm just gonna say that right there. I know that's like sad because you're putting that out in the universe. So there was a good chance I wasn't gonna get it because I was putting the energy that I wasn't gonna get it. I just tell myself that to kind of protect myself sometimes from that disappointment. But I still was true in what I wrote and what I was passionate about. And I love that the forum was about youth mental health, but it's also about how do we actually bridge storytelling and mental health, because that is exactly what all the stuff I'm always doing, what I'm always working on. So I thought that was a really beautiful tie-in. So yeah, the forum happened in May. So recently, it was literally a week before I graduated from university. And so there was a lot of stuff happening that week. There was an amazing opportunity because the event was supposed to be at the White House where we met Dr. Biden, the First Lady, Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, and Selena Gomez, because she was the keynote, because she's had her fair share of mental health and she's very open about it. And of course, the 30 of us that were chosen. So we were on stage and we were supposed to be speaking at this event, which we did. There were 6 speakers from the 30 of us. I wasn't one of them. It was so great to hear their stories. After the event is where we went back in the waiting room, and that's where President Biden showed up. And again, we weren't really expecting him because he wasn't on the press release. And I think that he just somehow maneuvered his schedule to meet us, which was really exciting. So I got to have I wouldn't say lengthy, but we all got to have like a 15-minute conversation with him because, of course, he's
Wow.
very busy and he had to leave right away. But it was so great to hear the president speak in the White House. It's not like you stumbled upon him like walking. Like that would be cool though. But he was there to see us. It was just so exciting. So it was a great opportunity, and it really felt like a kind of a dream in a way. It didn't feel real. Like afterward, I talked to a couple people who were at the forum with me, and we all agreed it was euphoric. It felt like a dream. So it was really interesting.
You paint a good picture there. Was that your first trip to Washington, or had you been there before?
No, I did like a little Washington D.C. trip in like middle school. They had like the middle school D.C. trip, but that was one time, and then this was the second time, and now this is my third time, which I'm going to be here for a while.
Very nice, very nice. And I think you mentioned MTV was one of the co-sponsor. Okay. So when you have that many, I'll call them different groups involved, how did you craft, because we've discussed storytelling, how did you craft your message in a way that there's many different audiences, interests, people that may, when it's such a desired outcome of being chosen for one of these 30 spots, who knows who's reading it? How did you kind of plan out to say, well, here's the message I want to get across, and I wanted to communicate it in this way to this audience? How did you do that?
That's interesting. And how the forum worked was we had the White House part. We also worked in groups where we kind of presented our own ideas, and that's something we did have to think about. We really had to think about there's going to be Pinterest out there, there's going to be Spotify, because there was a lot of different media partners in the audience. So it wasn't just MTV. So there was a lot of different media partners, and we had to really think about what they're looking for. And we just kind of how we did it was we decided to just stay true to what our message was, and that we want to inform people about youth mental health. And I understand how like your question can go, how do you craft that kind of message? But I think also it wasn't too difficult because we knew that we were all there for the same reason. And that's what we were reminding people. that we're all here to support youth mental health, and everyone was there for that. Even though we all came from very different angles and solutions, people still resonated and aligned with what we had to say because we all came understanding this message. So sometimes when you craft a message, the message in the back end is the most important, if that makes sense.
It does. And I want to kind of follow up there with youth mental health being the kind of central topic of the forum. What would be what you'd want either a one sentence or a highlight takeaway from someone who's not around, not familiar with the topic, just reads it. And I understand what all three words mean, but what does it mean, and what should I take away when I read them together?
I would say mental health is anything that impacts your mind's health, and that every single person does experience mental health. Not everyone experiences mental health conditions that are diagnosable, but all of us will experience a change in our mental health. If it's good or if it's bad, it happens all the time. So, with that knowledge that we all experience it, do not ignore it when someone's experiencing it really badly in your life. And that's where youth mental health is important, because I think sometimes youth can be misunderstood. We always hear all the time the trope that youth is misunderstood, but I think the reason why is because sometimes adults aren't listening or they're not taking youth seriously when we're seeing crises all the time. When you see the second most leading death for young people is suicide, mental health is a very grave concern. And maybe adults from different generations don't understand why Gen Z is on TikTok or these different platforms, but those platforms are bringing community. I'm not saying parents and people need to go on those platforms, but understand that they're finding solace in these places, and we need to bridge that gap between generations, because even though the generations are different, we all still experience mental health. But youth, I think, experiences a lot. And I think that's how it works with every generation. Every youth experiences a lot of different things because of what's going on in the world and everything. So that's one thing I will say. I know you said one sentence, but that's what I would say about youth mental health. It exists. It's I think it's an epidemic, and it's something we need to address. And the biggest thing is just being open to it and reading about it and advocating.
I did say one sentence, but I caught myself and threw in one highlight there. So you did just fine. Don't worry about that. That was a good answer. You mentioned, though, the ability for other age groups, generations to understand. And I think that's the first kind of level. The next, to me, is being able to not only understand, acknowledge, and then support and ultimately advocate. Because, as you said, we all have our own mental health, and we have the way that we kind of perceive others. So how can I, one, check in with somebody who might be, having a non-symptomatic, non-diagnosable mental health issue? How can I be supportive, and ultimately, how can I advocate to help that person or people who may not be able to do that for themselves?
Yeah, I think this goes back into the whole like listening and observing, and that again, I'm not an expert, but seeing signs in their appetite, in their sleep. Are they more aggravated? Are they not hanging out with their friends that they used to? Are they not doing things that they enjoy anymore? Are they giving stuff away? These are some things that may not seem important, but they could very much be incredibly important to their mental health. And I think the most important thing is to, again, check in by asking how they're doing and actually listening to them, actively listening to what they have to say, and also share your story too. And that, sometimes some people want to just hear or want someone to listen to them, but sometimes I think it's also important when you share your story that, I've experienced mental health too, and I've been where you are, and just know that I am a person you can always come to if you ever need any support. And if they never come to you again, and this it's different if it's a parent. I'm talking about like maybe a teacher to a student or something like that. But if they never come to you again, you still open that window. If they do need the support, that they can come back and always still check in and see how they're doing. I think that's important. And again, the advocacy, seeing what resources are out there and seeing and sharing them. These are some resources I know. If you know their parents, these are some resources, because you never know if their parents are aware, or maybe their parents don't even know what to do either. So yeah, I think those are some things you can do.
I'm sure it was your plan as a master communicator, but the notes I took down as you gave that answer were, as you share your story, being a good listener, being authentic, having that story, and then ultimately being the guiding voice, sharing with what your experiences were, and kind of everything that we've talked about with being that mentor, saying, here's what had helped me. Perhaps this can help you, and kind of tying those things together. So very well done there. Changing gear is a moment as we are somehow nearly at time. What does the day to day, or what is the kind of next steps for Landing Dreams PR look like?
Oh, wow. I mean, since I'm very focused on my job right now, I haven't really focused too much on Landing Dreams PR, but I will say that it has given me the tools to be an effective PR person. Not the best. I mean, I have so much to learn. I just graduated, but I've been able to personally get myself in places like New York Weekly, and Forbes, and BuzzFeed, and that's by just building a personal brand. And so I always tell people, if you have questions about PR, come to me. I can always tell you what has worked for me. I pitched myself to several different podcasts, and even just growing my network by speaking on podcasts. I've had people reach out about PR help, and I'm potentially bringing on 2 new clients in different fields that I didn't think about. Like, one is in body positivity, and one is in, I believe, like alcoholism. So very different things, but these are things to challenge myself and to just help them, just to elevate their voice, which is I think the importance of PR. So that is where I see Landing Dreams PR going, maybe in a different direction now, but I'm not as focused as I used to be in it.
Okay, very nice. And if our listeners want to find out more, connect with you directly, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm easy to find. Just type in my name. I'm really active on LinkedIn and Instagram. And yeah, those are my main platforms.
Okay, so we will post links there. We've talked a lot about the professional background. We hit on the move cross country, talked about kind of what issues you support. What do you do to unwind or to relax?
I
If you do.
will, yeah. I try my best to read about different things. I love spending time on social media, and that is not just scrolling through people's feeds. I definitely listen to thought leaders, and actually follow a lot of different pages. So I try to always stimulate myself in that area because I wish I would read more, but I don't read as much. But I do get some good content through, these leaders that are sharing stuff about, if it's like forgiveness or karma or just different topics. So I do that. Sometimes I'll meditate, listen to music. Sometimes I'll game. So those are the things that help me relax.
Okay, very nice. And so there's a little bit of background on Zane. For any of our Washington, D.C. listeners who run into Zane on the street, restaurant recommendations, things to do, I'm sure he's looking for it. But uh, so we have, like I said, we've covered a lot of material. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I probably should have, though, before we wrap up?
No, just my final thing is just believe in yourself that you can be a strong storyteller. It's all about just tapping into your journey, what you've learned, and how you think other people can relate. And I guarantee you, every single person has a beautiful history. You can walk up to a homeless person. I'm not saying anything's wrong with being homeless. I mean, it's a very sad situation, but you can walk up to just a homeless person and they have like the most beautiful history. So don't limit yourself because every one of us has a rich history.
Indeed, indeed. Zane, thank you very much for joining us. Connect with Zane on LinkedIn and Instagram. Show notes will include both those links. Thank you for speaking with us, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you.